In recent days, and especially yesterday, I've made very clear my view that the Harris-Walz ticket is a very strong one, and we are in a very strong place as a movement going into November. And it's clearly not just me noticing this, because MAGA media is freaking out. And one of the things that's really interesting is I've heard multiple Fox hosts, we talked about, I think it was Tommy Lauren, begging, even Lindsey Graham during a recent interview, begging Trump to stop with the, and this is my wording, not theirs, embarrassing, counterproductive, personal, petty attacks on Kamala Harris. And what they want from Trump is for him to make more policy-based critiques of the Harris-Walz campaign. Now, we could talk about why there's not that much there, because Trump's policy record is so much weaker than theirs, but those in Trump's camp thinks that he has a story to tell, and so they're saying, please tell that story, stop alienating people further by questioning Kamala Harris's biracial identity, by obsessing over her laugh, or Laura Ingraham obsessing that she dares to hug people sometimes. And what we're going to see here in this segment is Trump doing one of these very strange call-in interviews to Fox and Friends, where the three of them just have to sit there as he rambles and rambles and rambles. And you can tell they're trying to steer him. They're trying to save him from himself by keeping him on the rails. He still manages to go off the rails because that's what he does. So here, notice the setup to the question. Trump, they're so far left. Please say you're going to be talking about that on the campaign trail, not all this other crazy stuff you've been saying. And he'll stay on it for a while, then I'll show you the clips where he falls off the rails.
We know what Kamala Harris's record is, and we know what his record is, and they are extremely progressive. Talk about how you're going to handle this on the campaign trail. Will you just really hone in on how they voted in the past?
That's not a remarkable question if you haven't been looking at all the past coverage and the reactions to, for example, the NABJ convention, where Trump says that Kamala Harris turned black, and this whole nonsense that we've seen within MAGA media and prompted by Trump. And so the Fox hosts are understanding we're going to lose if this is our line of attack. So are you going to hyper fixate on their voting record, Trump? Please.
Well, I am. I'm going to be doing that. What he wants. If you look at his record with no walls, no security, let everybody in, he's worse than they are. You know, nobody knew how radical left she was, but he's a smarter version of her. If you want to know the truth, he's probably about the same as Bernie Sanders. He's probably more so than Bernie Sanders. She is more so than Bernie Sanders. That's got to be your guide, Bernie Sanders, and that's not a great guide. But there's never been a ticket like this. This is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. We want no security. We want no anything. He's very heavy into transgender. Anything transgender, he thinks is.
He's very heavy into transgender.
We want no anything. He's very heavy into transgender. Anything transgender he thinks is great. And he's not where the country is on anything.
Mr. President,
this is a shocking, let me tell you, this is a shocking pick. And I think it's very insulting to Jewish people, and I think it's very insulting to people that want security. I think it's very insulting to anything having to do with making America great again.
Look at the confused look on Brian Kilmeade's face. Why does he always look like that? It's so weird. I just don't know about these call-in interviews where three hosts sit there and listen. But it's interesting. I guess security, is Trump talking about law and order or national security? It should be noted over and over again that crime spiked at historic levels at the end of Trump's presidency, granted because of the pandemic, but also his mishandling of it, and has just been plummeting under the Biden-Harris administration. And funding has reflected that when it comes to federal investments in law enforcement. Trump actually wanting to, while he was president, wanting to roll back some of those federal investments in law enforcement. So a lot of talk, but his actions don't line up with it. And he mentioned Jewish Americans, an example of him not being able to stay where these Fox hosts clearly wish that he could stay, with a more widely resonating message. Here, he goes back to his attacks against Jewish Democrats.
Your reaction to Van Jones and that poll?
Well, we're going to try and win New York, and that hasn't been done for many, many decades, as you know, but we're trying to win New York, and we're very close to doing it. And probably that's another reason I was somewhat surprised. I think that any Jewish person who votes for a Democrat, or in this case, these people, but who votes for a Democrat, should have their head examined. They are so bad.
Yeah. And sort of an awkward laugh there by the Fox host. What a deranged thing to say. And before going further, hilarious, just hilarious, if it weren't so dishonest, that Trump says the Harris Waltz ticket represents an ambition to be communist. Obviously not true. We talked about a clip recently of Jessica Tarlov saying, it's weird to attack Tim Walz as a communist or a socialist, because I don't know too many communists who lead the 6th best business-friendly state in the country, which is Minnesota, and big business is flourishing in Minnesota. That's not exactly what you think of when you think of communist. And by communist, I guess he means universal free meals in K through 12 schools so that kids aren't hungry and can properly learn, have the nutrition necessary to learn effectively in school, or paid family and medical leave. That seems pretty common sense. Or universal background checks for firearms, or protecting reproductive rights. These things to almost every American are not socialist, communist, and they're just not definitionally. But most people find those very reasonable, and that's why Trump doesn't actually cite many things, other than he's very heavy on transgender, whatever the heck that means. Then he goes back to the petty attacks against Vice President Kamala Harris.
The media, outside of you people, of course, but the media is so, they're trying to build her up to the next Margaret Thatcher liberal version, and I don't believe it's going to happen. I hear she's hasn't taken one interview. She would never do an interview like this. That I can guarantee with any network. She doesn't do interviews because she can't answer questions. I don't know how she debates. I heard she's sort of a nasty person, but not a good good debater, but we'll see, because we'll be debating her, I guess, in the pretty near future. It's going to be announced fairly soon, but we'll be debating her. I'd like to see it on Fox, by the way. I would like to see it. My preference would be Fox, but we have to debate.
Do you have an announcement, Mr.
That is super interesting. So we'll wait to see what comes out on that, but unless he's just pulling that out of where, which could be the case, he seems to be indicating private discussions have been taking place between his campaign and the Harris campaign about a debate. And he used to be, just recently, he was saying he would only do a debate if it's on Fox News. Now he's saying, my preference is it would be on Fox News. So maybe behind the scenes they're working on something that they're going to announce, which is a debate not on Fox News between the two of them, which it's so important, so crucial that Harris and Trump match up on a debate stage. I do think that will be a moment for Vice President Kamala Harris to introduce herself to a lot of Americans who haven't really kept up yet. And we're seeing that as she introduces herself more, her favorability spikes. And as more people see Trump, they remember what they disliked so much about him. And especially with Harris's debating efficacy, I do think that would be a very, very important moment in this campaign. And then you have Trump saying this.
Because if she does this to America, every one of us are going to either be leaving, or we're going to be living like dogs. Our whole country, our whole system is going to collapse. Even the talk about her has driven the stock market down.
Yeah.
When the stock market goes down, when you see it go down, that's because she gets a decent poll number. She gets bounces in her poll, the market goes down. The stock market will collapse like in 1929 if they're elected.
It's just so ridiculous. He said the exact same thing. The exact same thing before the last election. And then we've seen record-breaking stock market figures over and over under the Biden-Harris administration. He said we would see a Great Depression, and we saw better economic performance than expected, predicted, and than other major economies. And he's somehow able to get away with his supporters just making the prediction again. I ranted a little bit about this on the bonus show in reference to Alex Jones. You can get access to the bonus show by clicking the join button below. But I was talking about how Alex Jones has been predicting year after year that World War III is going to happen in the next month, or it's going to start tonight or something. And then it never does. And his followers don't use that as an opportunity to say, oh, maybe Alex Jones is not the best person for me to be getting my information from, because he's shown his inability to correctly understand global dynamics and keeps asserting, but makes a bunch of money by asserting and freaking out his audience. So they go buy emergency preparedness kits on his website by believing that World War III is about to take place. The sky is always falling. And so a similar thing here, where I've mentioned to you before, a key characteristic of authoritarians in their rhetoric is a crisis. There always has to be a present crisis, and often one just around the corner if they don't hold on to or attain power. So Trump's crisis that he has to fear or evoke fear among his followers about that's present is the border related stuff. They're coming from jails, they're coming from insane asylums, Hannibal Lecter. And then also, if you don't elect me, the entire economy is going to collapse, which is what I was saying before the economy recovered after the disaster that I left for President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. So don't take it seriously. He also is very inconsistent when the economy, or I should say specifically when the stock market is up. He says it's because of him somehow. People are expecting him to win. When it is down, he says it's because of Harris. If you appreciate this show and appreciate the work that goes into the needless usage of 2 camera angles and want to support the work we do, you can do so by clicking the subscribe button if you haven't already. Back to the video. Then you have this.
I want to bring in Brett. He was talking about he has his daughter, his grandchildren now living with him, and you're concerned about the economy. What is your question for the former president?
So, Mr. President, I appreciate you giving our time here. One of the big concerns is, what are you going to do about bringing down the rent and things like that in the economy? Because out of 8 children that I'm a father and a stepfather to, 5 of them are struggling, and I'm giving them part of my income on a regular basis. How are you going to make the economy not just the the food and electricity, but bring down the rent prices, the housing prices, so that these kids can survive and without their parents' help?
Such a good question, Mr. President.
You're right. I hear it very well. And I tell you, first of all, I love the people that you're with. I know that I must have at least 99, perhaps 100% of all of them. And
always the first thing on his mind. I'm very supported by that group.
I think they're incredible. We are going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to bring down the cost of energy. Energy is what caused the worst inflation, I think, in the history of our country. Food prices are up 50%, sometimes more. You look at bacon. Bacon is quadrupled. You can't order bacon. You can't order anything. We're living horribly. We have the worst inflation we've probably ever had in our country.
It's not even close to true. But I should acknowledge the price increases have been very painful. We've gone through the causes and the way that this becomes a partisan issue inaccurately. So let's just not get into that for today. But instead, notice how when he's asked about such an issue, his response indicates how little he actually intends on doing anything to help people on that. I've actually heard Biden, I've actually heard Harris discuss and bring forward initiatives to invest in affordable housing, for example, to address housing costs. But Trump says we're going to drill, baby, drill. But we're already drilling at record amounts in the United States. So clearly that's not the solution. It might be more complex than that. But that works for his followers. And just one more wild thing for him to say.
They're as low or lower than they were 4 years ago.
Yep.
But remember, I had you down to $1.87 a gallon, and that was beautiful. They were good times. Thank you.
Do you remember why gas prices were so low at the end of his presidency? Was it because he masterfully did something in the interest of the American people? No, it was because the economy collapsed. He mismanaged a crisis. People were stuck in their homes, so there was no demand for gas. So yes, prices will get very low when you're in that situation, but that was not a good situation to be in. It's wild that we're able to live in an environment where collective amnesia is so present that people think fondly about the time when prices were as low as he's mentioning, because of the utter and complete crisis we were in, and where we were incapable of using gasoline for the most part because we were stuck in our homes. As thousands of our fellow Americans were dying every single day, as Trump was pitching disinfectant inside the body to get rid of COVID. Let me know what you thought of that in the comments. If you want to get extra content daily, you can do so by clicking the join button below, like I said earlier. And if you want to donate to the Harris Waltz campaign, you can do that by clicking the link in the description of this video.